To break it all down for us, I'm going to ask our panellists to come onto the stage. So that's you, Nick, Mark. We're always really proud to showcase South Australian talent at any time, and today is absolutely no exception. Despite South Australia having a very embryonic B Corp community, we're at 7, which is 5 under New Zealand, so there's a first benchmark, try and get as many as New Zealand. So despite us having an embryonic B Corp community, we didn't struggle to find leadership in this area, and we're really happy to introduce them to you today. I also want to acknowledge that there might be some B Corps in the audience today that aren't on the stage. Is anyone here from MUD Environmental? Couldn't make it. Seated massage. Yay! So hats off to you, one of the first B Corp in South Australia? There you go. Congratulations. As I said, it's not hard to find leadership in our own backyard. We just have to look. So allow me to briefly introduce the panellists, and then I'll get them to talk a little bit about their B Corp and answer the questions, if I remember to use this thing. So firstly, Nick Crowthers, hands up Nick, is the founder of Free Range Futures and a B Corp activist. It's very rare that you see Nick without his B Corp badge on. Free Range Futures is a creative and marketing agency and works exclusively with organisations that are dedicated to furthering progressive causes and enriching culture. Fun fact about Nick is he's never owned a Windows computer. Still true?
True, yeah.
Still true. Okay, next. So Nick's here is the small end of the B Corp spectrum. Next we have Kate Carroll, who's the Sustainability Manager for Beyond Bank, and her role is to be an entrepreneur, as Alison mentioned, within Beyond Bank, and she organises innovation and sustainability programs. Yep, and has been an ambassador for the B Corp movement for a little while now. We have Dr. Catherine Fall trooping along. Catherine is the Program Director at Torrens University. So for those of you, it added up to 6 B Corps in South Australia. I think Torrens was the one that you might have missed off your list. In 2015, Laureate, who is the parent of Torrens University, became a certified B Corp, and according to their website, is the largest B Corp in the world. And we have them in our backyard in South Australia. Also welcome to the stage, Mark. You're hiding away there. Can everyone see Mark? He's a good-looking man. You should see him. Mark is the CEO of Community Living Australia. Community Living Australia provides day options and accommodation and in-home support, respite and recreation activities for people with disabilities in South Australia. And from what I hear, is chomping at the bit to become a certified B Corp. So we welcome Mark to the stage. I'll also invite back Allyson Hewitt and Mindy Liao from B Labs. Nick, yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Nick, can we start with you, with your introduction and how you heard about B Corps and came to be? Thanks.
Sure thing. Thank you, Janine. Thank you. So we discovered the B Corp movement probably at a very low point in business. After my daughter was born, she's 6 now, so around 4 years ago, I'd left the business on autopilot for quite a while, doing family things, and it all went a bit sour, and we had to scale back the business, and things were tough. At the same time, we moved into Hub Adelaide. Hub Australia is a B Corp, so we count Hub Adelaide as well as another B Corp here, although they're not officially headquartered here. So at that time, we were really trying to figure out who we were and what it was we did. We were a kind of generic marketing company, I guess, at that time, digital marketing agency. And we sat down as a group and we went through a process of trying to redefine our values as an organisation. And in doing that, we kind of looked at the work that we'd done and recognised that perhaps half the work that we'd done in previous years was charities, not-for-profits, the arts sector. And that was the work that we really loved to do, and we got a lot of energy and reward from doing that. So on our 9th birthday, so just over 2 years ago, we made a commitment to henceforth work only for good. And very, very quickly after that, I started to actually question what it meant to be good and to work for good. How do I know which of these clients are good? How do I know that we're actually doing any good? So Jan, who was managing Harbour Adelaide at that time, introduced me to the B Corp movement that fit extremely well with answering the question of what is it to do good and be good. It all happened very quickly after that. So we went through the accreditation process. It was challenging for a small organisation, but we were supported in that. We went through, with seated massage at the same time, we went through a structured program to work through each section of the process week by week. It's been really foundational in the rebooting and reimagining of this company. So if someone had kind of gone overseas for 3 years and come back and seen us today, we'd be a completely different company. And a lot of that is having that vision of who we want it to be, but it's becoming a B Corp and having that community around us that has really been a framework for becoming a much stronger, more ethical organisation.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. And please accumulate your questions for our panellists. We'll go through and do introductions so you've got a background on all of them, and then we'll open the floor to some questions. So Kate, would you mind going next?
Hi. So I'm Sustainability Manager, obviously, at Beyond Bank. So my role at Beyond Bank is to try and embed that sustainability culture across the organisation, trying to sort of facilitate and bring everyone across the different departments or the different areas to identify what sustainability and what this B Corp movement looks like for them, and to sort of try to get them to generate the ideas and sort of drive this movement throughout our business. But Beyond Bank is a mutual bank, so we're owned by our customers, and Beyond Bank's philosophy or purpose has really been about supporting our customers and their communities so that in return they support our business. So a bit of that sort of circular economy. So that's been the business model for Beyond Bank, and that's really fitted in with this whole sort of B Corp philosophy. So I kind of came across this B Corp movement about maybe 5 months ago now, as I've been at Beyond Bank for 4 months, and it was during the application process and researching about this organisation that I discovered what a B Corp was. And I'd been going through an MBA at Adelaide University, and it just immediately resonated with me, this whole using people, using business as a force for good. So it was one of the key things that attracted me to this role. And I think how sort of Beyond Bank found themselves becoming a B Corp, I think initially when our CEO and the executive team sort of discovered or came across this B Corp movement, they were, well, this is us. We are a B Corp. Yep, let's do this. So it was very much just kind of jumping on board. We were sort of definitely in that space. So
great, thank you, Kate. Catherine.
Thanks, Janine. I'm the Program Director for Public Health at Torrens University, and I'm currently the poster child for public health with this head cold. So I apologise in advance for all the coughing and spluttering. I'll try and do my best. But at Torrens University, we are a national university. In Adelaide, Melbourne, Brisbane and Sydney, across the country, we have 12 campuses. But our parent company, Laureate Education, is a global network consisting of, I've got some stats here, 70 universities across 25 countries, and we have over 1 million students collectively. Laureate is committed to creating social change and lasting social impact, and we do this through our students. 88% of our students are in developing countries where we have really democratised the access and the opportunities for higher education for those students. We also like to harness our staff, our business people and the communities in which we serve for good, and we call this philosophy of ours, or our strategy, Here for Good. And it's something that you hear spoken on each of our campuses around the world on a daily basis. Our Here for Good philosophy and strategy has been embedded within Laureate International since its conception in 1999. So when Torrens University was launched in 2014, it was a perfect fit for us to explore the B Corp certification process. So I think that's my introduction. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. So we've got a small, a medium and a large B Corp here represented on the stage. I'm interested to know, Nick, it was quite clear with you. You had the vision. You could drive it as the founder of your organisation. But for Kate and Catherine, where did it start? Did it start at the grassroots, or did you have to manage the B Corp message up to, through, or like Catherine, was it top down for you?
Thanks, Janine. I was not personally directly involved in the certification process, but because the B Corp practices and philosophies were embedded within our organisation from the beginning, it was just a natural or organic transition. So our CEO championed the process, and each and every staff member was involved to some extent, and very much in board with the certification process, because that's what we do, that's what we believe in.
Yeah, so a similar situation, I suppose, to Catherine as well. I wasn't with the organisation when they first went through certification, but it was something very much driven from our CEO and executive level. They were, immediately, we want to do this. We are a B Corp. We've got to get on board. So, and then it just has filtered across the organisation from there.
Great. Mindy and Alison, I'm interested to know your experience in how important it is to get consensus. So as an entrepreneur or as a founder, even at the smaller end, how important is it to get that consensus of vision and belief that B Corp is where we need to go?
Well, I think it's extremely important, and particularly I think in my experience of working with entrepreneurs and businesses, we see the organisations that race to the finish line and race through certification are ones that obviously have that buy-in from the top. But it's also not to say that an entrepreneur doesn't play a role, and in fact we see that actually as quite critical. One example I will give is in Melbourne there's a woman called Ashley Wall. She's a really bright young lawyer. She works for a commercial law firm of 150 staff, and she came to one of these sessions, loved the B Corp idea, decided that she's going to work for a B Corp, went back to the organisation and to the managing partner and says, I'm going to work for a B Corp, so we need to be one. And lo and behold, they last year at the Champions Retreat won an award for being a champion. So I think it's really important, but it doesn't have to be top down. It can be from anyone.
I would just say that regardless of where it starts, if it starts at the top or starts at the bottom, you've got to work to either build. You can't just say, we're going to be that. It's really about living and breathing those values, and that DNA has to percolate either up or down, and I would say the best is it percolates from the bottom up and the top down.
Are there any examples that you've surprised you, Alison, in your travels, where you wouldn't have thought that type of business is a natural fit for B Corp?
Well, I think the BDC one that I talked about, right? So it was this rising superstar that, we never did this kind of random internship where you can just come and have an innovation vacation at Mars. We never did that before. And she started that and then took it back into BDC. And, they really weren't thinking that way. They were thinking traditional entrepreneurship, but she got them into the blended value space and made it happen with Craig's leadership, the head of CSR. So I was really surprised by them, but they did it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so you've got consensus. and everyone says, this is where we want to go, we want this B Corp badge on our banner. What's next, Mindy? What do we do? Nick, where did you start?
Well, the first step is to take the assessment. So, everyone here on the panel certified has gone through that process to do an online assessment, and this is a free tool that we call the B Impact Assessment. So we have these red cards back at the stage of the table. It has the URL, so you can do a 20-minute taster of that. That's really the first step, and what it does is give you a score. So you get to benchmark where you're at as an organization currently, and it'll tell you how you're doing compared to companies in your size and sector as well. And you can obviously compare yourself to other companies that you admire, B Corps, when you go to their page and look at their scores, and it breaks down into all the different areas of community, environments, governance, workers, and as well as impact business model. So the first start is really take that first step, but also whether or not you want to become a B Corp, I really highly recommend that you use this tool. It's free. We call it a public good because we really want more businesses to use the tool as a self-assessment to measure and manage the impact of your business. And imagine if more businesses, and last I checked there are about 125 million businesses around the world, if more, if not all of them, measured their social environmental impact and managed it with as much rigor as their balance sheet, then we would have very different outcomes from the business community. So I digress.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the room that's actually attempted the online assessment tool? Yeah? And would you mind sharing your experience with that process with the room?
Yeah, I run a small food tourism company here in Adelaide, and I've started the assessment process and got bogged down in the running of my own business. So I'm sort of 3/4 of the way through that assessment. But I have a quick question now that I've got the microphone, and that is turning a small business like mine, the economic reality around making money, driving income stream from B Corporation. I understand the governance and the benefits of the ethics of B Corp, but what are the real economic drivers for a small business like mine in a little town like Adelaide, and how do I turn those into stronger income streams to connecting to the people? Customers.
We're going to give it to Nick.
So I guess I am the small business person on this panel. My business is different to yours in that it's B2B. I guess yours is B2C. The key elements for us, though, I guess, in answer to your question, are that it hasn't led to a whole lot of new leads coming into the business, but it certainly is a very empowering and reassuring element of conversations when talking to potential customers, and also perhaps more significantly for us, the energy that it's brought to the team and the way that it's helped to align our values within our team and to attract new, really high quality stars to join our organisation has been really, really important to us.
I'd also probably echo that as well. Beyond Bank, certainly for attracting employees, I know it was relevant for myself, but then also there's been other staff that have joined our organisation which said the main reason they've applied is because we were a B Corp and they wanted to be a part of that. So
I would say a couple of quick things. Canadians and Australians tend to score higher because this was developed in the US, and the kind of HR standards they have around things like maternity leave or parental leave, all of that stuff, it's a really different point of view. So Canadians and Australians tend to score higher. So there's a good benefit for you to do that. Secondly, I think talent attraction is huge. This top talent really wants to work for B Corps and live and work their values, as it were. The other thing I would say is if you're ever interested in attracting impact investing, as that impact investing community is growing, they're looking for certified entities. So there's that. And this sounds a bit silly, but when we think about future of work, we talk less about B2B and B2C and P2P. It's all people to people, and how we're figuring this out. And I want to buy from you if you're a certified B Corp, right? So more and more that's happening in this space.
Good. There's another lady in the audience that had attempted the accreditation. Did you want to share anything? It's covered off? Okay. Mindy, what role does B Lab Australia play in these people starting the process? So what sort of services can you offer people who are at the beginning of their journey?
Sure. We run masterclasses and webinars across Australia and quite regularly for anyone who wants to come along to get some tips to completing the assessment. I run a webinar every month because we don't get to Adelaide often enough, and to spread ourselves across, different capital cities, frankly. But tomorrow we happen to be having one hosted by Beyond Bank. Because it's free, so it's a 2.5 hour session where you can come and we'll talk about how the standards were developed, share with you sort of the principles behind the B Impact Assessment, guide you through how to complete it, and give you lots of tips as well as tools and resources to improve. So the idea is actually assess, compare, and improve. So improvement is really what we're trying to engage everyone to do. So we have a whole bunch of resources around that as well.
Great. Alison, you made a comment that Canadians and Australian businesses are highly likely to accelerate their application just because of the nature of the way we think about business and some of our legislative. What's your experience in getting through the first time? Is that just the prize? Is it 3% or 10% that get through their accreditation on the first pass?
I don't know how long it takes people, really. I mean, it's certainly a journey. If you look at how many companies in Australia have attempted the assessment, there are more than 2,000 companies, and so about 10% have become certified. And that journey, how long it takes, it's up to you. For some companies, it could be 3 to 6 months, and doing the assessment actually takes 2 hours. I have small companies who've said that we did it in 2 hours, and that's possible. So it's about answering all the questions if you have the answers. For a large organization or for a company that early on your journey, it might take longer if you're not getting the points, if you need to implement improvements in your business to achieve the 80-point standard out of 200, yes.
It's 80 out of 200. This is like the easiest test. But in fact, don't you wish, right? You could have got through uni at 80 out of 200. But in fact, there's lots of things that that are going to be no-brainers for you, and other things you're like, wow, I never even thought of that. That never occurred to me, and so you're going to have to develop that. But I loved what Mindy said about this is a process of self-improvement, and just keep trying to do the best you can. But it's actually, the standards are good, and we're actually always working to make the standards better and actually more rigorous as we grow. So best to get in early. But I think it's not as challenging for many of us who think a certain way to be able to score well on those.
Yeah, I'd like to open it up to the panel about your experience with the accreditation process, just briefly. If there's any tips or tricks in terms of preparing for the process, and then is there anything that you would do differently if you had to go through that process again?
So the process is actually, I'd say it's quite nurturing. It is challenging, but for every question there are examples and best practice of what you should put in place to address each criteria. So it's quite nurturing in that way. We went through this process and we got to, I think, 76, 78 points. And it kind of then got put on hold because we were distracted doing some other super important thing, I'm sure. And we got to the point where the assessment that we'd worked through was about to be superseded by a new version. Each year, more questions are added in, best practice changes. And we were advised to go ahead and submit it, even though we didn't have the 80 points, because then at least we'd have, I think, 3 extra months to go and fix those issues. But once you've submitted, you have to spend a couple of hours on Skype with someone from San Francisco or Chicago somewhere. Yeah, someone from America, and they go through every question and ask information about how you've answered and ask for documentation to back it all up. And in doing that, they found an extra 8 points that where I'd misinterpreted things. So we went from 78 up to 86, and that was wonderful. What I would do different? Well, we've been a B Corp for 18 months, and you need to recertify after 2 years. So we're about to dive into that right now. In fact, we're about to move to a new studio on the weekend coming up, the long weekend. And part of our assessment previously, we were able to adopt from Hub Adelaide's assessment a number of the environmental things, their recycling and green energy policies, some of the procurement that they did of things that we used within the space. So we're going to have to go and reimagine all of that. That's very exciting to explore all that for ourselves. And also one area, probably our lowest scoring area, was around our suppliers and supply chain, and we're really excited about engaging and finding organisations who are more ethical, social enterprises, minority-owned organisations, that kind of thing to engage with. So that's going to be a great journey to go on as well.
At Torrens, I know that our process was heavily aligned with, well, working very closely with the team from B Labs, and I would recommend very open and strong and clear communication with the B Lab team right from the get-go, and maintaining that communication channel, because some of the questions are contextualised for the US, so the B Lab team were able to break those down into a more appropriate language for the Australian climate, and being able to run things past the B Lab team from beginning to end enabled us to, well, ensure that we were on the right track. And I think what you said, Mindy, about performance and review and improvement, we found at Torrens that this whole process of B Corp certification has not only allowed us to quantify our social impact, but since our initial certification, we've been able to improve our B Corp performance by 20%. So, and we attribute that to the team's help at B Lab, so thank you for that.
Did you want to add anything, Kate?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started at Beyond Bank, I was tasked with the recertification process, which was a really great way to sort of deep dive into the organisation, basically. And it was a really good opportunity to meet a whole range of people from across the business and to sort of get their data and input into the actual impact assessment process. So that was a really great opportunity for me, a really good way to find out more about the business as well. But certainly from that improvement perspective, that impact assessment has really allowed us to identify where our opportunities are for improvement. So that's a really big takeaway. And the impact assessment, it is a very rigorous process. I think for us it took probably around 2 months for us to sort of gather that data together, because we are a sort of a medium-sized organisation. So that was good. I think it was really important to be able to have that rigour and that credibility to this process for an organisation of our size. And from a different perspective as well, I think from a small business perspective, the information and the detail that the impact assessment provides, you don't need to have someone, a sustainability manager in your business to have to do this. It's got all the detail, everything that what you need to look for, and all the tips and tricks that explain that information for you. So it really does provide all that information for people that don't have perhaps the in-house expertise. So,
Mindy, before we go to you, I've got a question from the floor, if I could. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, my question's about the how of involving stakeholders as compared to shareholders. The mechanisms for shareholder involvement are pretty clear to most of us in the audience, but stakeholders less so. And is that an active thing, or is it just through impact assessment?
I'd like to hear something from Mark. He's sat there without saying one word.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I haven't forgotten. forgotten about him. He's got his own special bit in a second. So, sorry, did we get a response to the lady's question?
So the question is, how do you engage your stakeholders? Yeah. That's a really good question, and the example that comes to mind, I think employees, first of all, if your organisation would be a kind of a first natural place to go. I think it's extremely important to engage all your stakeholders, obviously, and Etsy, you might have heard of the global craft marketplace. They're B Corp, and within I think 10 days of their certification. They didn't do this to think that, it's just about Etsy. We really want our employees to tell us how we can be a better B Corp, because it's about 2 years when we recertify down the track where, how are we going to improve? And they wanted the employees to tell them that. So they had a hackathon, as do startups, I guess, and had invited all the employees to come along, and those who were interested in similar things got to sit together. So people who were really passionate about how can Etsy be more green came up with all these different ideas, and others were passionate about how can we help women progress in the organization, and others were about how can we help, maybe a financing option for our crafters, and how can we build community through our crafters. And so all these different ideas, I think more than a dozen ideas, came to life and were, actually supported to become real programs, and that's just one way. So I would encourage you to check out the assessment, and we have a governance section, and within each of the questions, they're very specific in terms of what kind of processes and structures you have in place. One of the questions is, do you share financial information with your staff? Do you have board? You have a board. How often do your board meet? What kind of, what's the composition of your board? And everything that's asked is open to, being verified. So that's what the third-party standard is about. So it's about, how do we really know you're walking the talk, and that's why you recertify every 2 years as well. And 10% of B Corps get selected every year to go through a, randomly selected review audit process. So, that is to hold them to account.
Great. Mark, I'm giving you a couple of seconds warning that you're actually going to have to speak in a second. But Alison, did you want to comment? And then I've got a question from a man at the front.
So just really quickly, it's nowhere near as rigorous as what it is with shareholders, just because it's nascent, but there are indicators that are emerging, particularly things like diversity on the board. Are there women on your board? Like all of that kind of stuff. Do they reflect your customer base? So it's really quite emergent. And the thing that I quite love about B Corp is they're open. And if you have ideas about how to make that standard even better, or you're doing something that's best in class, they're open to hearing it, because they too they're a nonprofit, and they're in a process of continuous improvement as well. But it's nowhere near as rigorous.
And the question from the front.
Alison, I think you both talked about the distinction between B Corp certification and government recognised legal structure. It seems to me one of the reasons governments are reluctant to regulate in this area is because businesses is always telling us about the costs of regulation, and government just needs to get out of the way and let business get on and do its thing. But there's a lot of differences between the two, but I think one thing that they both have in common is that businesses wear these things as a badge of honour, and it's useful to promote and communicate the sort of ethical dimension of what you do to your stakeholders. How influential has the B Corp certification been in places like the UK with CICs and the L3Cs, where governments have actually introduced those legal structures?
So I don't know. I don't know. I would say, because we failed in Canada to get benefit corporation in the benefit corporation structure into place yet. Mostly, I don't see it as additional regulation, but in fact an additional option. So I think there's value in that around the brand, around creating opportunities for impact investing to get into that space and to grow. So no one is going to say, you must be a benefit corporation, but it is an option that's available for those that want to pursue it. I would be interested, and I don't know what the impact has been in the UK in terms of B Corps versus KICs and other things. Do you know that?
Yeah, So in the UK, they do have KICs, and I think their current legislation in Corporations Act provides protection to company directors to make decisions considering all stakeholders. That's one of the key issues with why we need the legislation here in Australia, which is that, number one, you asked about what's the state? Is it shareholder primacy or stakeholder primacy? The law states, and I'm not a lawyer, apologize for any lawyers in the room who might know this better than me, but I believe it says directors must make decisions in the best interest of the company, and that's not tested. That's why we need to create the certainty to enable those who want to pursue stakeholder interests alongside shareholder interests.
Can I just jump in there, and this might hopefully address your question, but also back to yours as well. We're quite fortunate within Laureate International because we, being a US-based company or organisation, we did have the opportunity to achieve public status as a public corporation, and that was crucial for us before becoming a publicly listed company on the stock exchange, because yes, we have a liability or accountability to our shareholders, but we did want to protect the benefit that we're providing to all of our stakeholders as well. So we're very keen to support that movement in Australia.
Okay, just a minute, Mark. You'll get your chance in a second. Just hang in there. We'll do one more question, and then I really need to give Mark a chance to tell us all what he's been holding onto for the whole session. Thanks.
Thank you. Here, Ignacio from Argentina, where B Corps are growing steadily. They have a steady growth in the last years too. For those who manage B Corps, how do you manage trade-offs between profit and planet or profit and people when you have to decide, as an example, shifting for a supplier that has higher costs but manage better the natural resources? So how do you manage on a daily basis on those kind of trade-offs? Do you have any good example about that?
Oh, I'd say the B Corp movement is really breaking down that dichotomy between doing good and making profit, because an effectively and efficiently managed company and a sustainable company should be able to achieve both simultaneously. And we're managing to do that, and having it built into our legal structure for our organisation ensures that.
Yeah, look, I think I certainly would agree with Catherine that I don't think it really does need to be about trade-offs. I think from Beyond Bank's experience, certainly it is an improvement process, and there are timing comes into it in terms of what it is that you want to achieve and when the best time is to do that. But we've certainly found that engagement that we get from our customers regarding B Corp, and particularly our work in that non-for-profit organisation space, and the support that we get from there and the interest that we get, just people kind of coming up to us. And one of the great things about this B Corp movement is the community, the B Corp community that it opens up to you as a business. You've got a captive audience, so you've got like-minded organisations that kind of want to come to you and work with you and support your own businesses, and that's a really important part of this whole B Corp movement, for sure.
I noticed there's a question over there. I'll come back to you in a second. I just do want to hear Mark's voice. Mark is CEO for Community Living Australia, as I mentioned in my introduction. If you go to Mark's website, or Community Living Australia's website, it already has a really strong set of values and missions. And I'm just curious, why would you then be urged, Mark, to pursue something like B Corp? Why aren't your visions and values and your mission statements enough?
I guess my journey around B Corps is relatively new, and I was at a session, in fact, last time when Alison was out, and it was a roundtable discussion around B Corps. And Nick here was at the table, and he probably didn't know that I was sitting on the other side, a not-for-profit organisation, learning. And Nick made a comment, not all not-for-profits live their values. You know, some of the people that they see probably don't do as well in terms of living their values and having that impact, that wide berth impact that a B Corp does. And from that moment on, I thought, that's a challenge. You know, how can we do better, and how can we help, I guess, the not-for-profit sector, which is transforming at the moment, particularly in the disability space. Everyone here would have heard about the NDIS, right? It's, we need to do things more efficiently and with a business hat on, because money's tight. In the old scheme, we had a single focus. So government would say, this is how you need to provide services, and you need to focus on people with disabilities living within their communities. Now, through a B Corp, that focus can widen. So you're not just focusing on your customer, your client that you're supporting into community. You can focus on whole of community, and which, if you do that well, benefits your customer, the person with a disability. So all of a sudden, I thought, this is a really good thing. Not-for-profits need a focus like this so that they can actually think broader than just the person with a disability they're supporting here and now. They can think of the whole community. But also, I think it gives us a set of measures to know what that impact is. One of the things that I'm hearing through the Thinkers program and talking to lots of different community service providers is, how do you measure impact? And I think the B Corp movement gives us a set of measures for us to actually compare against and see where we're at in doing that. Now, I know a lot of you here probably think, well, a not-for-profit can't be a B Corp. You know, we've had that discussion before. I think this is the perfect platform for us to try something new. And it can start from South Australia, Adelaide, where we actually challenge the B Corp movement and say, let's have a new category for not-for-profits, so we can show how good they can be and the impact they can have on all of community, all of their stakeholders.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you, Mark. I would encourage any not-for-profits in the room to use the tool once again, you know, to assess the impact of your operations. You know, how you can improve operationally, as well as, you know, I'm sure you do a lot of work in terms of your own impact measurement. And there is one exception, that if you are a company limited by guarantee without DGR status, that you can become certified as a B Corp. We have two in Australia. We have a not-for-profit a digital agency called Agency, based in Sydney, and GECA, the Good Environmental Choice Agency, they're a certification company of environmental products. They're also a B Corp. And also another example is not-for-profits and charities can own B Corps. So there is a great example in Salvo Legal. Anyone heard of Salvo Legal? Salvo's Legal? They are a law firm, a commercial law firm owned by the Salvos, and they provide commercial law services to businesses, and it's an income generation stream to provide other services for more marginalised communities, and obviously owned by the Salvos as well. So, and they're certified B Corp for a couple of years now. So,
Alison, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I think the other really important thing from a not-for-profit point of view is not-for-profits purchase a lot of goods and services from other companies, and I guess it's a big part of the sector, the not-for-profit sector. I couldn't tell you the numbers of not-for-profits in Australia, but it's huge. And just in the disability sector alone, there's something like $25 billion going to be spent on the NDIS, so that money's available. So as a purchaser of services, we want to ensure that we're actually maximising our impact on community through our purchasing power as a not-for-profit. So you know, I'll be looking for B Corps to do business with.
Alison, I just wanted your experience of the social assistance and the demand from the not-for-profit sector to engage in B Corps.
So I'd say a couple of things. First of all, you know how people say we need out-of-the-box thinkers? Mark can't find the box. There's no box for this guy. He's a terrific thinker in this space, and we're really lucky to have him here. I think the corporate structures are really blending. You know, you mentioned this, Catherine, right? And it's happening more and more. So I think there could be huge opportunities to actually use what's available and then take it to the next level of impact. So appreciate the challenge and demand into the B Corp folks. I just wanted to actually quickly pick up on our friend from Argentina, if I may, which is it's really challenging to be exactly in the middle of always mission first and always money first. You're not. You're one or the other. And so you just have to make a decision. So I'll give you a quick example. Part of what we do at Mars is we have an event space. We have to make decisions every day. Do I rent it out to a big corporate to run their AGM, or do I rent it out to a small social enterprise that has no money? And so we've developed systems that says how often we're going to make it available for free and how often we'll do that. And it helps us so that every time the opportunity comes up, we don't have to have this debate. So you need to figure out, are you money first, are you mission first, and when are you going to create the opportunities through clarity of strategic decision making instead of waiting to be reactive. So that's what I would say in that, yeah?
Great.
Is that it doesn't have to be a trade-off, and there's research that shows that. Arabesque, look it up, and Oxford did a study of 200 research all out there and found a high, something like 90% correlation between strong ESG practices and financial outcomes. You're able to, it lowers your cost of capital, increases your financial performance, and it's just a good thing to do.
Cool. Question up the back.
Hello. Mark, I was really excited actually to see that you were part of the panel. I, at one time, ran a B Corp here in South Australia, and I'm hearing a lot in the sector that identifies as not-for-profit or yes for purpose, and a lot of people are struggling with this concept of social enterprise, and now they're those of you in the room who are from the not-for-profit sector and are thinking about the difference or similarity between social enterprise and B Corp. I'm just really curious, because of the disruption of the NDIS and South Australia being a government, Adelaide's a government town, this is a government festival we're part of, participating in. What sort of conversations are being had in the not-for-profit sector about social enterprise where you're able to sort of reflect to B Corp, because I think it is an interesting model, and there does need to be a pathway. So I'm just curious about your colleagues and what you're hearing.
I don't think there's a huge discussion at the moment, but I think it's coming. What the discussion is about at the moment is because we're driven to business models, boards are changing. So it's about being profitable, being sustainable. And the fear that I have is that, and I've seen it, that some of the boards, because they've been so focused on business and money, they're actually losing that vision of their values and their sense of mission. So I think that's where the discussion will start to turn, and why a B Corp movement will suit the not-for-profit sector in Australia.
Excellent. There's a question down the front.
Yeah, back on the not-for-profit again. I work for a not-for-profit myself, and just thinking about, either not going down the B Corp path ourselves, but is there an incentive for B Corps to actually engage with the not-for-profit sector as maybe part of the standards or the certification, actually gaining the certification? So can someone who's not quite going to make it partner with a not-for-profit in terms of having either a profit split or something like that in order to get over the line to become a B Corp?
Absolutely. So there are many different ways to get points in the assessment, to get to that 80 points. Partnering with a not-for-profit, giving your services, designing your business model around that is absolutely yes. So that's the short answer. Many organisations, many companies gain points in terms of charitable giving. I mean, that's sort of the kind of more traditional way. You make money on one hand and you give it away on the other hand to, feel good and because it's the right thing to do and whatnot. And the next generation of these organisations, like social enterprises, are designing their business models in order to deliver impact. And so all that gets recognised in the standards. That's why the point system, and we think that we're the one of the kind of leading standards out there to try to quantify it.
Great. Another question on the left.
Yeah, g'day. Picking up from what Catherine was saying, and also the fellow from Argentina, and Alison touched on it as well, with like you were listed on the stock exchange, Torrens University, you said that. If I'm an investor, how much am I sacrificing from a return on investment through a B Corp as opposed to another? And in saying that, knowing if I'm an investor and I've got lots of money, I'm quite happy to invest in something that might be more social and environmentally conscious. But if I'm just a mum and dad investor out there that wants to capitalise, how much of an impact is that going to have on B Corps trying to raise capital from the average Joe as opposed to an entrepreneur who might be have the ability to just invest in the future because that's what they want, they choose to do as opposed to their necessity?
That's a very good question, and I honestly don't have the figures. But I think for us at Laureate, being on the stock exchange was always part of the plan, but we're hoping that's attractive to investors because of our social good and our here for good strategy and philosophy that we're living and breathing. But we are for profit, so for us it's a bit of a balance. I'm sorry I can't directly answer your question, but...
I know just from some research that was done through Morgan & Stanley, which I suppose has got a US audience, but certainly the research is indicating that companies that have this corporate social responsibility side is comparable to that traditional business model, if not better performing from that financial and sort of investing side of things. So the research is certainly indicating that it is performing better. So
I would just say that it's actually no longer a trade-off. If you look at Unilever is actually looking at being a B Corp. Ben & Jerry's, one of the companies they acquired as a B Corp. Their performance rivals, almost anyone. So I think that historically the trade-off is actually not proving to be true. And certainly in 2008, any of those that on the sort of B Corp or corporate social responsibility way outperformed anyone else, right? So as we go into this period where we're doing these ups and downs, in terms of a resilience factor, it's a critical win. And I just want to say really quickly, in terms of corporate structures, and you mentioned this, when I work with nonprofits, I often, if they have a revenue-generating arm, sometimes it actually makes sense for them to actually have a compendium for-profit structure. So at Mars, we have several different types of structures. Our investment arm is in one structure, the real estate arm is in another structure, the charitable arm, which is the education, is in another structure, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't have to have just one structure anymore. And the more that we have, the more opportunities to gain different forms of investment and financing. So I would encourage anybody to not just be thinking narrowly about the kind of corporate structure they have. Think broadly about what the opportunities are to have several.
Just one of the things on that I wanted to say is at the moment we're looking at how we can set up a shared service arrangement. So to support not-for-profits to achieve their back-of-house functions in an efficient way. And that'll be a for-profit entity, and it will be a B Corp. So it's a path that we want to go down.
We've got a question in the aisle there. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope it's okay to go a little bit broader with my question. But there's a lot of language in this space of business as a force for good. And I think social enterprise would be one of the more, in terms of waking sort of general society up to this, I think social enterprise would be one of the most well-known terms. B Corp, probably one of the lesser known. Conscious capitalism, came forward, with the book. Sustainable business is probably co-opted. Responsible business. I'm curious if you have a preference in terms of the language that you would like to take hold to sort of ripple the concepts through, and if it's correct to think of the B Corporation then as the implementation of all these sort of wonderful principles that are sometimes a bit nebulous.
Thank you. I happen to have worked in the social enterprise space with Social Traders, one of the organizations that was set up to specifically grow social enterprise in Australia. So topic is near and dear to my heart. What is the preferred language? well, we use the language that we use, but I think we're all trying to head in the right direction. There are social enterprises within the B Corp community. Who Gives a Crap Toilet Paper is a great example of that. Hepburn Wind in Victoria, which is a community-owned windmill, is an example. I can, Salvos Legal is another example. There are many, and you know, I don't know necessarily if, you know, we're saying that it would be great if they all want to become B Corps. I think what we offer, it's not a language, we actually have a standard. What we're offering is a standard, and I personally feel like whatever the language is whatever the language people prefer to use. But there are, I guess, the ecosystem where we recognize that we actually work in an ecosystem, that there are social enterprises that are impact first, but there are also B Corps that are just really good, rigorous businesses that may not have an impact business model, may not have a, you know, social enterprise business model. They're just really, you know, really good businesses that take care of their environment, take care of their workers, take care of their staff, you know, take care of the community, and didn't design their business model. They could be a law firm, they could be an accounting firm, and still become a B Corp. So I think the spectrum, just recognizing that there is a spectrum, but we're trying to get the whole business community to go towards like thinking about purpose and thinking about impact and positive impact.
Great. There's a couple of questions down the front. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I've got two questions around the question of scale, because that seems to be a big issue here. The first one is that scalability is a huge challenge for entrepreneurial startups. Does the B Corp group as a whole communicate in a way that they're able to adopt or trial exciting sort of social startup opportunities to get to scale? The second question around scale is that you want to increase the number of B Corps and, you know, get as many as possible. How do small, medium and large companies feel about the possibility of having scale within the particular business industry that they're in? I mean, I can imagine that community living, if a lot of respite organisations become B Corps, that promotes the sector as a business. But in other sectors, it might be more a differentiation tool.
Just reframe that question in my mind. So I think in terms of scale, I think the tool is really important for that. It's a framework for people who are starting up businesses to think about that. So when we talk about startups, we often point people to use the framework to build your business, you know, set a strong foundation from day one. And the benefit company legislation is really important for that as well, because once that's available, there will be this status called the pending B Corp status, where from day one, you can set up as a benefit company and embed purpose. And you know, I guess scaling impact, on the other hand, I personally feel like having a business model and being able to open yourself to attracting the investment that you need to scale quickly is really important, that you may not be able to achieve with a different structure.
I think it's just about whether B Corps are capacity for group rather than individual.
So I'll just put my social innovation hat for just a second. When we think about scale, we traditionally think about scaling out, more replication, bigger growth. Within our movement, we also think about scaling up, which is how do we engage the critical policy lever to get to a new point of change. B-Lab is doing that by going to the benefit corporation status. So that's one way they're achieving scale, by getting policy changes that allows that to go to a whole different space. The other thing that we talk about is scaling deep. And in scaling deep, we're getting to behavior change. So I choose my friend's market if he's a B Corp as opposed to someone who's not. So my actions are different. And by pulling the levers of market, by pulling the levers of policy and behavior change, ultimately what we're getting to in the world of social innovation is culture shift. And what we want is culture shift. So when I think about scale, I put that kind of lens on it, and I think that B Corp for me is a form of movement, and that movement will enable us to get to a new level of impact way greater than any one organization on its own.
I'll add to that too. And you mentioned this earlier in your presentation, Allyson, around impact investment and B analytics and gear. So that is one other way that we scale. So we, you know, tell people about certification, because that's sort of the first step of identifying leaders. so B Analytics and our impact investment rating system uses those similar platforms using the same B Impact assessment tool, and encourages businesses to use the tool and as a cohort. So if you're an impact investor, you can ask your companies to take the assessment. If you're a large multinational, you can ask your subsidiaries to take the assessment. If you're a large bank, like Bank Colombia was actually doing this, 4th largest bank in South America, asking the supply chain to take the assessment. And not with the view of evaluating them, yes, that may be the case, but it's actually having a view of how they're doing in terms of impact so that they can actually work with them to help them manage and improve that. So there are different ways to scale the movement as well.
We're just getting the microphone down the front here, but while that's happening, what can we do in South Australia if we're going to achieve this target of 20 B Corps in South Australia by 2020? And Mindy, you're saying by the end of 2018 you want 20 B Corps in Adelaide or South Australia, so let's grab that challenge and run with it. What can we do as a community? What do you think are the elements that we can do to kind of activate all these great people who've given up their time to come and find out about B Corps?
Can we make B Corp a household name so consumers make their choices based on the B Corp movement?
Referring back to that last question as well, I don't see B Corp as being a competitive advantage for Free Range Future or for any of us. I would like to see as many B Corps as we can in South Australia. This thing about 20 B Corps, when we were up in Alice Springs in May, Shane was there, Mindy was there. On the opening night, there was one of the global founders of B-Lab, Bart Houlihan, gave a speech reflecting on his 10-year journey through growing this movement, and it is definitely a movement. And one of the things that he talked about there was this incredible catalyzing effect of having 20 B Corps in one community. And I'd been a B Corp for over a year in that time, and I've been to a leadership day, and I was at this Champions Retreat. I'd engaged maybe in 2 or 3 other events in Melbourne over that time, and it is a tremendous community of people, a tremendous community of very ethical, very driven business people, and they procure from each other, they collaborate on projects, but they share their experiences, they share their time and their insights, they're very nurturing. That's what I want to see in South Australia, and that's why we've started this challenge of getting the 20 B Corps here. So I'd like to think that once we hit the 20, we can be more like 100 by the time we get to 2020, because something magical happens when we get to that point.
Great. Any other comments from the panel?
Yeah, look, certainly I think it, very much about today is to try and get that message out there, and if everyone in the audience is able to sort of talk to business owners or people that they know in the business world here in South Australia and say, have you heard about B Corps? Look into it. And the B Corps that, myself and Nick and, we're all resources as well that, we're always happy to support and encourage other businesses to join this movement. And, Mindy and the B Lab group are just wonderful in their help and in their support. So there's, just getting that message out there and using the people that are already in this space to draw from.
We need more marks.
I think one of the things, being an early adopter, you do get some competitive advantage. But I agree, it needs to be an overall culture that we want to develop going into the future. And you think about, we've been hearing about the millennials and what drives them, what makes them tick. And it's a values-based generation that we're catering for. So we need to change. And I think it's an exciting time. And everyone here that's interested in being a B Corp or wants more information about being a B Corp, you need to talk to Mindy, talk to Nick and the others. I'm ignorant really, but I think we've got this opportunity to do something very special in South Australia and use our marketing power, encourage other people to look at it. It's well worth it.
Great. We've got one last question and then I'll wrap up because I see that our lunch has arrived, so thank you.
Hi, I'd just like to ask about the conditions for employment conditions and remuneration, particularly having a look at the difference between the social and knowledge enterprises, which tend to make up a large portion of the B corporations, and the sort of manufacturing, the Unilevers of the world, and how the certification how the certification might push for change for remuneration, particularly for the lower paid workers, particularly with things like the Fight for 15 in the US and the income disparity between the high income and low income workers within the same company here in Australia.
So I guess everything you said are addressed, are questions within the assessment. So we encourage people to think about that, and we even give credit to people who have organised companies that have participated in collective advocacy to improve conditions and just to lift the industry. Having a living wage is a really big one. We don't currently have that in Australia. I personally would love to see some community come together, and who knows who that is. In New Zealand, for example, they do have a living wage, so it's not just about a minimum wage. So there's so many different aspects that we looked at, and we definitely encourage that. We don't, as a B Lab, it's very small, not-for-profit. We're a team of about 4.5 FTE in Australia and New Zealand. I guess would look to the community of B Corps if there's any particular issue that they want to take up, and it certainly is a possibility. The sky's the limit.
Cool. Thanks very much. I just want to make some closing comments and thank everyone for sitting. It's a very long time to be sitting still and listening, so we've tried to make it as engaging as possible, and we hope we've achieved our initial objective of informing you about B Corps, but also inspiring and asking you and inviting you to become part of the B Corp community. So please keep in touch either through the B Lab Australia website or through the Dunstan Foundation website. So please join me in thanking our B Corp panellists, our B Corp community members in the audience, and our primary thinker in residence, Allyson Hewitt. And an acknowledgement too to the staff of Open State, to our sound and our videographer, and to the crew that set up today. We thank you. We also thank the partners. I'll just skim through them very quickly. Dunstan Foundation and the Social Capital Residencies couldn't do what we do without the generous support of some of our Social Capital Residencies partners. A couple of quick promotions, if I scan through our massive collection of amazing supporters. We have the B Corp Masterclass, which Mindy mentioned. There's very limited vacancies available, so if you are interested, please bail up Mindy after this, or one of us, and we'll point you in the right direction of how you can register. So it's a nice intimate group. It's not a big conference workshop or a large assembly like this. We also really encourage you, if you love the sound of Allison's voice and you want to find out what her insights and observations are, like how well is Adelaide, South Australia doing in the social innovation space. This is her second visit to South Australia, so she'll be summarising all of her thoughts in her oration, which is next Thursday, 12:30 to 2:30. So we really love to see all of you there, especially those that haven't heard her speak before. Welcome you back. And of course, Open State is just the beginning. It's day one of day 11 days of jam-packed programs of people who you may not ever hear speak in Adelaide again. So I encourage you to look at the program and get out there. The PowerPoint from today should be up on our website by the end of today, so if you do need to go back and just jog your memory, please do that. And we welcome you to stay for some light refreshments and talk to our panellists. Thank you again for your time today. Thanks.